I'd like now to introduce Bob Fine, who will be our next speaker. Bob is the founder of the International Virtual Reality and Healthcare Association, IVRA. Bob, well, you know, I think it's important for me to just tell you why I think Bob has been instrumental in helping us move the field forward. We need community. I think it's very difficult if we're working in separate academic groups, if we're working in separate small businesses or larger businesses, in different sectors of medicine, dealing with technology. It could be very frustrating, very lonely, and very isolating if we don't have a way to get to know each other. And Bob, through his work with the community together, is just made such a difference. We've had some amazing conferences. We've had some amazing workshops. We meet monthly now with a conference phone call. And I think we're addressing some of the common challenges that everybody involved in this ecosystem is addressing. How best to deploy the technology safely, how best to address issues of intertwining new technology into the ecosystem of a clinical setting or a hospital, how to address regulatory issues and reimbursement issues. So, Bob, thank you very much for your strong contributions. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Well, Walter, thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. I just before I get started, I want to first just thank Hoag Hospital for having me today. It's actually a great privilege among all these other amazing and fantastic presenters. But I also want to, commend, as some have already have, both Rob from Hoag and but also Dr. Spiegel from Cedars-Sinai. I think in the position I am in, I do get to see at a global level what's going on, and they are really leaders at a hospital level, and not just in terms of their internal interactions, but also pushing events like this and really helping with the education which is needed. But they are both doing more than I've seen any other hospitals do yet to date from an overall standpoint. And Walter, thank you as well for your support in helping me build this association. And you've got the acronym right, IVRA. So we're gonna make that stick. So next slide, please. Just a brief background about me. I spent first half of my career as a systems and sales engineer in a lot of telecom and wireless work, quite a bit around the world. Started traveling right out of college, and all of my work has had a strong international component, and have had the opportunity to work at both large corporate organizations and some small startups as well. And then for 10 years, I had a dream job in which I was the global director of IT for a large conservation nonprofit, Conservation International, here based in Washington, and had the opportunity. I built out their global IT network in 40 countries, and traveled overseas half the time for about 10 years. So I am not missing any travel due to COVID. I had enough for a couple of lifetimes. Next slide. Right after that stint with Conservation International, back by happenstance, 11 years ago now, I ended up organizing what turned out to be the first conference about social media on the East Coast, of all things. And we now, it is so ingrained in our culture today and our politics and everything. But 11 years ago, Facebook and Twitter particularly were very, very new, and everyone was still kind of, finding different uses for it. And we ended up launching a print magazine about it, which did very well for a few years, and was focused on that for a solid 6 years. So next slide. But shortly after the Oculus Kickstarter got bought by Facebook, which is now back in 2015, early 2016, people were talking about social VR as a very early application. And so that's kind of where I started looking at VR again from the social media digital marketing lens 5 years ago. I'm also a longtime video gamer, so I've always kept an eye on VR from a gaming aspect. And I just started experimenting and doing different one-day events in VR and trying to see where the interest was from a sector perspective. So everything from VR and architecture to VR and defense, the impact of VR in for good efforts, social impact efforts. But we did this first VR and healthcare event 4 years ago here in Washington at George Washington University Hospital. I didn't know Walter really at the time, but he was gracious enough to do a remote keynote, which went over well, and we had 100 people in the room. And of those experimental events, it was probably the most successful and had the most interest and opportunity. So working very closely with Walter, we put together the second conference that we held at Harvard Medical School the following year. And we had over 250 attendees. And it was the largest event I'd ever put on. And we had 6 tracks, which was 3 tracks too many, but it was just an amazing event. And I think really helped bring a lot of the community together. And so around that period, I then made the decision that healthcare was the sector I wanted to focus on. I have a little bit of a biology background, environmental science, but really don't come from the healthcare sector. So it has been come from a nonprofit sector and experience, and healthcare is such a unique market beast. Compared to anything else from a business standpoint, and just brings so many unique issues, and opportunities as well. And then we've been doing an annual conference in Europe now. We were going to be having our 3rd annual conference this year, but had to unfortunately cancel that due to COVID. And we are planning our 5th annual conference, global conference for next year. Next slide. So in March 2019, we formally launched the association at our 3rd annual conference at the University of Arizona with these 40 founding member organizations. And very honestly, ever since that, it has just been absolutely nonstop. And we are, as of today, we're at about 90 member organizations. And from the beginning, have taken an approach to try to build the association from the standpoint of building it so it's representative of the healthcare ecosystem. So it isn't just about the VR startups working in the space, but it is actually about having all of the different parties at the table, teaching hospitals, universities, primary care hospitals like Hoag, research institutions like CABI and NHS and NIH, and also trying to bring in government regulatory early discussions happening with the FDA, because it is such a complicated sector. I believe it is requiring all these companies to want to work together, including the payers, to come up with a solution that satisfies everybody, because it's just not, you just can't take the product and go to market and not worry about who's going to pay for it. Does it require regulatory approval? What kind of data is necessary to prove to the healthcare community that your product is effective? So it's been great from that standpoint. Next slide. So what I've been trying to do for the last couple of years from a presentation standpoint and talking about the association and the market in general is, from my own personal viewpoint and experience, I think it's a long journey. It's not a market for your typical Silicon Valley startup that it might go, IPO in 2, 3, or 4 years. Getting the healthcare market is slow to change, both from a technology standpoint, particularly, and it's going to be a generational change, not much different from mobile phones. And but again, the iPhone really didn't become the mainstream device it is until maybe 5, 6 years ago, which was 10 years after it was launched in 2006. Next slide. And so an important reality, next, is that 99% of the healthcare community is not aware of and does not really understand virtual reality. The people here today are in the 1% or less. Actually, I was just meeting somebody yesterday by chance who works on Capitol Hill as a lobbyist in the pharma industry. And when I was trying to explain, that I do stuff in virtual reality and healthcare, it was like I was speaking a foreign language. And so next slide. Next slide. So just again, to keep this all in perspective, healthcare makes up 20% of our economy. It's a top 5 issue in the election this year. It's a huge amount of area that we have to cover from an education standpoint. Next. And it's just going to take a significant amount of time and effort to educate the marketplace. And that includes patients, that includes practitioners, that includes the payers, and that includes the regulators. So is that 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years? Somewhere around there. But it's going to happen at different rates, and it's going to happen with different applications. But we are seeing VR development happening in all arrays of healthcare, as Walter alluded to in his presentation. And it is, absolutely fascinating what people are trying and experimenting. Not necessarily that all those things will be successful, but you're not going to find what's successful without the experimentation. Next slide. And I think, virtual reality from a consumer awareness standpoint did turn a corner this time last year with the release of the first Oculus Quest headset in May of 2019. It was a big holiday item last year, and if you wanted a headset for Christmas last year, you could not get one. And if you wanted a headset when COVID hit from January through April this year, you could not get one. So it's definitely gaining ground from a gaming standpoint. But through that, other people are slowly seeing the other types of applications it's available for. And Oculus just released the Quest 2, which is shipping next week, and I think will be another big holiday item, and will be competing for people's dollars against a PlayStation and an Xbox this year. But hopefully people over time will, and thankfully, even though Facebook is not fully embracing the enterprise sector and healthcare directly, there are apps on the Quest available now that are helping in the meditation state, a health and wellness standpoint. AARP's application was just launched there. There are a couple of other great meditation apps on there. So it is happening, but it's just happening at a very slow pace and a little bit at a time. Next slide. So what's our focus for the next few years? Education, education, and more education. Next slide. This past August, we actually did a free online event that was a week long, and we had 47 presentations. From the majority were from the membership, presenting their products or their applications, and that is all available online at no cost, on demand, with that URL. And we had over 1,000 attendees. I was extremely pleased with the turnout, and and this is what we see as part of our education effort. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're planning our 5th annual conference next March, and Yesterday, the slide said Nashville on it, and unfortunately, and announcing here for the first time, making the really difficult decision that where we are with COVID today, early March is just not going to be feasible for an in-person event next year. Unfortunately, I just don't think our exhibitors and enough travelers and speakers will be, even if the vaccine is out before the end of the year, we're not going to see widespread adoption for 4 or 5, 6 months. So, but we are going to move forward with it with the same dates, and it will be online and it will be in VR. And we're going to make a very concerted effort to make this a very accessible and attended event in VR, so people get that experience of knowing what at least having a virtual conference can be like in VR. And it's a very, very different experience from a 2D online event like Zoom. Not that there's anything wrong with that, just very different and a different type of experience. So we are currently accepting submissions for that. And if you're interested, please use that URL there. Next slide. And then lastly, an event I started 4 years ago, really as an educational piece as well, is we've established, virtualrealityday.org, which, and each year it's gotten a little bigger. And the last couple of years we've had, more than 50 cities participate. It's scheduled to be the last Saturday before Black Friday. Idea being try to get people excited about VR. Maybe they'll buy a headset. So this year it will be on Saturday, November 21st. Because of COVID, we are going to do an online event only, just one event in AltSpace VR, which has been a great partner. They are owned by Microsoft today. And it will be a 24-hour round-the-clock event. And the last 2 years, we've had 1,400 attendees. And I hope we'll have a similar turnout. And then last slide. And just my contact information. I try to make myself extremely accessible. And if you have any questions or about anything, please don't hesitate. I relish the role of trying to connect the community, trying to make more partnerships happen, which I think we've been doing a good job of the last year, and seeing it happen on a daily basis. And when we can get the startups working more with the hospitals, working more with the universities, getting clinical trials going, I think it just helps to push the industry forward as much as we can. So with that, thank you.